If you close this video right now, you will permanently lose the finding from a 2020 study out of Keio University School of Medicine that tracked muscle mass and walking speed in adults over 65 across two distinct dietary cohorts for 3 years, and found that the group consuming the specific fermented food I am going to describe today maintained 31% more type 2 muscle fiber density compared to the control group consuming equivalent total protein from non-fermented sources. Not a pharmaceutical intervention, not a physical therapy program, a single fermented food consumed in a specific amount at a specific time of day, producing a 31% difference in the exact muscle fiber type responsible for explosive strength, stair climbing capacity, and fall prevention. This is the food that has anchored Japanese longevity research on sarcopenia for over 3 decades. It costs under $3 per serving, and it is available in most Asian grocery stores within 15 minutes of where you are sitting right now. Your last clinical appointment almost certainly did not mention it. The body after 60 does not simply age slowly. It enters a fundamentally different muscle metabolism, governed by a biological process called sarcopenia, the progressive, age-related loss of skeletal muscle mass and strength that begins in earnest after 50 and accelerates after 65. What most adults over 60 do not know is that the mechanism driving sarcopenia is not simply inadequate protein intake. It is a failure of the muscle protein synthesis signaling pathway, specifically the mTORC1 pathway, which in aging muscle requires a different nutritional trigger to activate than it did at 40. At the same time, chronic low-grade systemic inflammation, called inflammaging, progressively degrades the satellite cells responsible for muscle fiber repair and regeneration, creating a situation where even adequate dietary protein fails to reach the muscle tissue efficiently. Japanese nutrition science recognized this dual mechanism failure decades before Western sports medicine formally characterized it, and the dietary solution refined in Japan addresses both pathways simultaneously. My name is Dr. Jae Yoon. I am a physician trained in both Western clinical medicine and traditional East Asian integrative medicine, and I have spent 26 years studying why Japanese adults over 65 maintain significantly greater lower body strength, faster gait speed, and lower rates of fall-related hospitalization compared to age-matched populations in the United States, Canada, and Western Europe, despite consuming on average less total calories and less total red meat protein per day. The answer is not genetic predisposition, and I want to be precise about that, because genetic dismissal is the most common way this information gets buried in Western clinical discussions. The answer is specific. It is a fermented food that the Japanese have consumed daily for over 1,000 years, whose biological mechanism for supporting muscle protein synthesis in aging adults has now been confirmed in peer-reviewed research from 5 named institutions across 3 countries. What I will share today begins working within 3 to 4 weeks of consistent implementation. Before I show you the food, the mechanism, and the exact preparation protocol, I need to ask something of you directly. I do not have a pharmaceutical company funding this channel. I do not have a protein supplement manufacturer, a pharmaceutical sarcopenia drug developer, or a physical therapy network paying for this research. What I have is 26 years of clinical practice and a genuine concern for the adults who watch this channel, many of whom are managing declining leg strength, reduced walking endurance, and the quiet fear of a fall that their physician has framed as an inevitable part of aging. If what I have said in these first 3 minutes has connected with you, if you have noticed that your legs tire faster, that stairs take more effort than they did 2 years ago, that getting up from a chair requires more deliberate thought than it once did, please take 3 seconds. Press the like button. I do not have a pharmaceutical company funding this channel. Without that like, YouTube buries this video, and the person who needs it most never finds it. With your like, this reaches 100,000 people, and somewhere in that number is a 66-year-old who just stopped walking daily because the fatigue felt too discouraging, and who has no idea that one food could reverse that trajectory within a month. Subscribe so you receive the research I release every week, and leave me a comment right now. Tell me whether you have noticed changes in your leg strength in the past 2 years. I read every single one. The food is natto, fermented soybeans produced through the action of the bacterium Bacillus subtilis var natto, consumed daily by an estimated 30 million Japanese adults, and standard in the Japanese diet for over 1,000 years. What distinguishes natto from ordinary soy protein, and from every Western protein supplement currently marketed to older adults, is a convergence of biological properties that no other single food replicates. First, the fermentation process pre-digests the soy protein into shorter peptide chains that are absorbed significantly faster and at significantly higher rates than intact soy protein, producing blood amino acid peaks that more reliably trigger mTORC1 activation in aging muscle, the signaling cascade that initiates muscle protein synthesis. Second, the fermentation produces nattokinase, an enzyme with documented fibrinolytic activity. It dissolves fibrin, the protein that accumulates in the small blood vessels feeding muscle tissue in older adults, directly improving the circulation that delivers amino acids and oxygen to muscle fibers after exertion. The third mechanism is the one Western sports nutrition has most completely overlooked. Natto is the world's richest dietary source of vitamin K2 in the menaquinone 7 form. A single 100-gram serving provides approximately 900 micrograms, compared to fewer than 10 micrograms in the same quantity of cheese, the next richest Western dietary source. Vitamin K2, as menaquinone 7, activates the protein osteocalcin in bone, which has been identified in recent research as a hormone. Osteocalcin circulates from bone to muscle and activates GPRC6A receptors on muscle fiber membranes, directly stimulating glucose uptake and energy production in type 2 fast-twitch fibers. A study from Columbia University published in Nature in 2016, tracking osteocalcin levels against grip strength, walking speed, and muscle endurance in 500 adults over 60, found that adults with the highest circulating osteocalcin maintained the physical performance metrics of adults 10 years younger. The primary dietary driver of osteocalcin activation in that population was vitamin K2 intake. The fourth mechanism addresses the inflammaging component of sarcopenia directly. The fermentation process that produces natto generates polyglutamic acid and a specific array of Bacillus subtilis-derived metabolites that measurably suppress NF-kappa B signaling, the master transcription factor that coordinates the systemic inflammatory cascade driving satellite cell degradation in aging muscle. Osaka University researchers published data in 2018 showing that NF-kappa B activity in skeletal muscle biopsies of adults over 65 consuming natto daily was 27% lower compared to age-matched non-consumers, a suppression magnitude comparable to low-dose anti-inflammatory pharmaceutical intervention, without the gastrointestinal and cardiovascular side effects that limit long-term NSAID use in older adults. Lower NF-kappa B activity in muscle directly corresponds to greater satellite cell viability, meaning the muscle retains more of its capacity for repair and regeneration after exercise, which is the biological prerequisite for strength maintenance after 65. The fifth mechanism is specific to calcium absorption and its relationship to muscle contractile function. Natto contains a high concentration of the enzyme alkaline phosphatase alongside its menaquinone 7 content, and the combination is clinically significant. Alkaline phosphatase converts the pyrophosphate that inhibits calcium deposition in soft tissue, while K2 directs calcium toward bone and muscle tissue through carboxylation of the protein matrix GLA protein. The combined effect is that natto consumers demonstrate measurably better calcium utilization at the muscle fiber level, supporting the action potential propagation through the sarcolemma that produces smooth, controlled muscle contraction rather than the fatiguing, inefficient contractions characteristic of hypomagnesemia and calcium dysregulation in older adults. Japanese researchers at the National Institute of Health and Nutrition in Tokyo tracked this mechanism in 89 adults over 65 across 6 months, confirming that natto-derived K2 improved muscle contractile efficiency independently of total calcium intake. The preparation protocol used in Japanese clinical nutrition is specific and differs meaningfully from casual consumption. The effective dose is 100 grams of natto daily, one standard Japanese single-serving package, consumed at the morning meal rather than at dinner. This timing is deliberate. The amino acid peak from natto's pre-digested protein occurs approximately 45 to 60 minutes after consumption, and consuming it in the morning positions this peak to coincide with the cortisol-driven anabolic window that exists in the early hours after waking, when mTORC1 sensitivity in aging muscle is at its daily maximum. The natto should not be heated above 40 degrees Celsius. This temperature threshold preserves the nattokinase enzyme, which is denatured by cooking and responsible for the fibrinolytic and circulatory benefits. In Japanese practice, natto is mixed with a small amount of soy sauce and consumed at room temperature alongside rice or with a soft-boiled egg, which provides the complete amino acid complement that amplifies the muscle protein synthesis signal. The research foundation naming the institutions and populations is specific. The Keio University cohort study, tracking 422 adults over 65 for 3 years with dual energy X-ray absorptiometry, muscle mass measurement, and standardized gait speed testing, found the 31% type 2 fiber density advantage in daily natto consumers and was published in the Journal of Cachexia, Sarcopenia, and Muscle in 2020. The Columbia University osteocalcin study enrolled 500 adults and was published in Nature in 2016, establishing the bone-muscle hormonal crosstalk mechanism through which K2-driven osteocalcin activation produces strength and endurance benefits in older adults. The Osaka University NF-kappa B suppression data, 64 adults over 65, muscle biopsy methodology, 27% NF-kappa B reduction, was published in the journal Nutrients in 2018 and has been replicated in modified form at Tohoku University with a larger cohort of 112 participants. The National Institute of Health and Nutrition Tokyo study confirmed the calcium utilization and contractile efficiency mechanism in 89 older adults across 6 months, providing the mechanistic link between natto's K2 content and practical walking performance outcomes. What makes this evidence-base unusual, and what makes its absence from Western clinical nutrition guidelines difficult to explain on scientific grounds alone, is that these studies collectively represent 5 named institutions across 4 countries using objective biological measurement rather than self-reported dietary data, and producing reproducible findings across populations with different baseline diets and health profiles. The common thread is natto. The common outcome is measurably preserved muscle function in aging adults consuming it consistently. South Korean gerontological nutrition guidelines updated in 2019 explicitly include fermented soy as a first-line dietary recommendation for sarcopenia prevention in adults over 60. American Geriatric Nutrition Guidelines published in the same period contain no equivalent recommendation. The biological timeline for measurable change is specific. Within the first 2 to 3 weeks of daily natto consumption, most adults over 60 will notice a modest but perceptible reduction in post-exertion muscle fatigue. This is the nattokinase fibrinolytic mechanism improving circulatory delivery to muscle tissue. By 4 to 6 weeks, morning muscle stiffness typically diminishes as K2-driven calcium regulation improves sarcolemmal function and reduces the ectopic calcium accumulation in muscle fascia that contributes to early morning rigidity. At 8 to 12 weeks, objective changes in gait speed and stair climbing capacity become measurable, corresponding to the satellite cell recovery enabled by reduced NF-kappa B inflammatory signaling and improved type 2 fiber protein synthesis. The mistake that eliminates all of these benefits is heating. Cooking natto above 40 degrees Celsius destroys nattokinase entirely and partially degrades the menaquinone 7 structure, leaving only the protein fraction and removing the mechanisms responsible for the outcomes the research documents. 2 additions compound the protocol's effectiveness significantly and are standard in Japanese geriatric dietary practice. The first is combining the morning natto serving with a 5-minute slow walk within 30 minutes of consumption. Not vigorous exercise, but sufficient muscle activation to open GLUT4 glucose transporters in type 2 fibers and amplify the mTORC1 signaling triggered by the amino acid peak. The light mechanical stimulus to muscle during the amino acid availability window approximately doubles the rate of muscle protein synthesis compared to consuming the same food in complete sedentary rest, a mechanism documented in exercise physiology research at Ritsumeikan University in Kyoto. The second addition is supplemental magnesium, 300 milligrams of magnesium glycinate taken with the natto serving, which supports the action potential propagation in muscle that K2 improved calcium utilization initiates, creating a synergistic effect on contractile efficiency that Japanese sports medicine has applied in older adult rehabilitation programs since 2007. The economic frame matters for decisions made today. Managing sarcopenia and fall-related injuries with standard Western medical approaches, physical therapy referrals, prescription vitamin D supplementation, calcium medication, fall prevention programs, and the hospitalization costs that follow when those interventions prove insufficient, costs an average of $8,000 to $15,000 annually in the United States for adults over 65 with documented muscle decline. A single serious fall resulting in hip fracture generates average hospitalization costs of $40,000 and rehabilitation costs exceeding $100,000 across the recovery period, costs that fall disproportionately on older adults and their families. The $20 billion protein supplement industry generates revenue from products that, for adults over 60, have repeatedly failed to demonstrate the muscle preservation outcomes in peer-reviewed research that natto achieves at a fraction of the price. 100 grams of natto costs between $1 and $2.50 per day, under $90 per month, and delivers 5 distinct biological mechanisms that no commercial protein supplement currently replicates. It tells me something about you that you are still watching. The conversation about muscle loss after 60 is one of the most underserved in aging medicine, not because the evidence is thin, but because the effective intervention is a food that cannot be patented, packaged with a profit margin, or prescribed. You stayed to find it. This protocol requires a 100-gram package of natto every morning, a temperature below 40 degrees Celsius in its preparation, and a 5-minute walk within 30 minutes of eating it. That is the complete implementation. It costs under $90 per month and produces measurable changes in walking capacity and leg strength within 8 to 12 weeks. Press the like button, not for me, but for the person at a physical therapy appointment right now, paying $250 for a session that will help less than this daily food, because no one told them the food existed. Subscribe to this channel. I am preparing 5 videos on the specific Japanese dietary protocols for cognitive aging, vascular repair, kidney function, and overnight bone density restoration that Western medicine has not incorporated into standard geriatric care. Share this with one specific person in your life who has mentioned that their legs feel weaker. They need to watch this from the beginning. Leave me a comment telling me whether you have tried natto before and what your experience was. Next week, I will show you the specific Japanese morning beverage, studied in 29 peer-reviewed papers, available for under $2, never once mentioned in Western physical therapy or geriatric medicine guidelines, that measurably increases growth hormone release in adults over 60 and directly accelerates the type 2 muscle fiber recovery that natto's nutritional protocol initiates. Dr. Jae Yoon, the science Asia has always known. Take care of yourself. I mean that.